6 days. That's how long Canada had to avoid a 50% tariff. 6 days to fold. 6 days to sign whatever Trump put in front of them. They didn't take a single one of them. It's the kind of moment that makes you lean in. On one side, Donald Trump calling Canada nasty, not once, but again and again, like he's trying to make the word stick.
Canada's nasty. They are. They're nasty. People think Canada, they're nasty. People, I love the people, but they're nasty. Nasty leadership.
I think listening to those comments yesterday by the president actually had to do a double take. I thought maybe he was talking about the Iranians or Russians. Was very surprised that he was actually speaking about Canada.
I love the people, he says, almost as an afterthought, but they're nasty, nasty leadership. On the other side, a country that just walked away from the table, deal untouched, deadline ticking. And that's the twist nobody saw coming. The same country he'd spent weeks branding as difficult, ungrateful, nasty, just called his bluff. So the question isn't really about tariffs anymore, it's about who blinks first. 9. That's the number nobody's talking about because while everyone's fixated on the tariff deadline, the real story is what the U.S. actually asked for behind closed doors, and it's a lot bigger than one number on a headline. 9 demands. Not requests, demands. Drop the retaliatory tariffs, get American booze back on Canadian shelves, loosen dairy protections that have stood for decades, and then almost slipped in at the bottom of the list, a new critical minerals and energy partnership.
We know from speaking with sources that the U.S. approached Canada in talks with 9 things it wanted concessions on.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has 9 priority issues that they would like to see addressed, including removing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products, putting American booze back on provincial shelves, and tweaking how dairy quotas work. Sources say the U.S. also wants to create a new security, critical mineral, and energy partnership with Canada that would see them get preferential access to the market.
One that would hand the U.S. preferential access to resources Canada has never had to share with anyone. 9 demands, 1 deadline, 0 signatures. So here's what doesn't add up. If Canada truly has nothing to gain by holding out, why hasn't it walked away completely? That answer changes everything that happens next. $28 billion. That's what's sitting on the table if this goes wrong. Because while Washington and Ottawa keep talking, the clock isn't stopping for anyone. Top Canadian officials are still in the room, still negotiating, but they're running out of runway. 6 days until new tariffs hit $28 billion worth of Canadian exports.
They've got 6 more days to make a deal before a new set of tariffs targeting a wide range of Canadian goods take effect.
You've heard the word the cliff that we'd go over if the U.S. imposed yet another set of tariffs on $30 billion worth of our exports.
The goal? Get a deal in front of the president by Monday or Tuesday. Right now, they're not even close. And here's where it gets tense. The Prime Minister has already started asking his own officials what retaliation could look like. Not if, what. That's not a country bluffing, but there's a deadline behind the deadline that almost nobody's reporting. Sources say if there's no deal by next Wednesday, Canada may not have the appetite to keep talking at all.
We also reported last week that Canadian officials have warned the U.S. that if they can't reach an agreement by next Wednesday, then Canadians may not have an appetite to keep going with these talks.
Which means the real countdown isn't 6 days. It might be 4. He signed it himself. That's the part that gets buried every time this story comes up. USMCA, the trade deal now hanging by a thread, wasn't inherited by Trump. It wasn't some old agreement he's stuck defending. It was his. His signature achievement, his first-term win, the deal he stood behind a podium and bragged about. 6 years later, it came up for renewal, and the same man who built it decided he didn't want to extend it. So why walk away from your own win? To answer that, he reached for something almost nobody remembers exists, Section 338.
The USMCA was President Trump's signature achievement in his first term on the trade front, but just 6 years later, when it was up for renewal this summer, he decided he didn't want to extend it. So they're being forced to use different authorities. Section 338 here with Canada is one new authority.
A law so old it's never been used by a single U.S. president in 96 years. Not once. Until now. Which begs the question, if this deal was strong enough to brag about once, what changed? Because the answer isn't really about trade at all. Here's the twist. The person paying for this fight isn't who you think. because tariffs sound like punishment aimed outward, like Canada's the one who bears the cost. But that's not how it works. Not even close. The consumers who pay tariffs are the ones in the country imposing them, which means every time this 50% tariff gets mentioned, it's not Canadian wallets taking the hit first. It's American ones. A trade analyst put it plainly. Trump seems obsessed with Canada even though, by the numbers, it's a relatively small problem. So why the obsession? Follow the money to dairy. Canada protects its dairy market fiercely, something the first USMCA tried to fix by setting a quota. A certain amount of U.S. dairy could cross the border tariff-free. But go past that quota and the tariff explodes, up to 200% in some cases.
Dairy has long been one of the stickiest trade issues between the U.S. and Canada. Canada has a very, very protected dairy market. They tried to address this in the first USMCA in the president's first term. They established a system where the U.S. could export a certain amount of dairy products to Canada without paying a tariff. But once that quota is reached, the tariffs get really, really high, 200% in some cases.
Sounds damning. Except there's one detail that changes everything about that number. And it's coming next. 200%. That's the number everyone quotes. Here's the number nobody does. 0. Because that 200% tariff, and the one that sounds so outrageous, the one used to paint Canada as unreasonable, only kicks in after a quota is reached. And the quota the U.S. is supposed to fill? It's never once been hit. Not once. So the outrageous number everyone's citing is a threshold that's never actually been crossed. Which means the headline justification, the whole Canada's dairy tariffs are outrageous argument, barely survives contact with the actual math. But numbers alone don't win arguments, people do. So we went to someone who's actually sat across the table from Washington, not once, but for decades. And what he said next reframes this entire fight. They need us to survive. That's the line Trump dropped about Canada. Simple, blunt, meant to end the conversation before it starts. Except somebody was in the room to answer it, Ralph Goodale, a man who spent decades sitting across from American negotiators long before this current fight ever began. And when you ask someone like that whether Canada really needs the U.S. to survive, you don't get a slogan back. You get math. Well, he says, almost amused by the question, maybe they do, maybe they don't.
In all fairness, they need us to survive. Without us, there's no way they can survive.
Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. We have to care about our side of the border, and remember that we're operating from a position of considerable strength.
That hesitation right there, that's not uncertainty. That's a man about to make a case, and it starts with a number that might change how you see this entire standoff. Lowest debt in the G7. That's where he starts. Goodale doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He just starts laying out numbers, one after another, like a man who's done this 100 times before. Strong job growth just posted last week, foreign investment building for over a year now, growing partnerships with countries all over the world. And then the number that actually matters most. Canada isn't just a market for the United States. It's the market, the single most important trading partner for nearly 40 of the 50 American states.
You just saw those job growth numbers last week that were pretty impressive. We've got the lowest debt in the G7. We've got a very strong foreign investment, and we've got the size and the value and the quality of the Canadian market, which is the single most important market for nearly 40 of the 50 American states.
Let that sit for a second. Americans sell more to Canada than they sell to the UK, France, China, and Japan combined. So when someone says Canada needs the US to survive, which direction does that number actually point? And Goodale isn't done. Because leverage isn't just about what you sell, it's about what's underground. Potash, critical minerals, the stuff nobody thinks about until they can't get it.
We also have assets like critical minerals and potash and others that are pretty important to Americans in terms of supplying their economy with the essentials of what makes them prosperous.
I mean, critical minerals in abundance, natural gas, oil.
If you're willing to play those cards,
that's the reason. Yeah.
If you're looking for buttons to push, we got a list, and that's the list of exemptions that the United States gave us: critical minerals, energy, potash. Those are the buttons we can push.
That's the second half of Goodale's case. Because leverage isn't just about who buys what. It's about who controls the raw materials an entire economy runs on. And Canada, he points out, holds a lot of exactly that, the essentials America needs to keep its own industries running. So we need to understand our leverage, Goodale says. Use it judiciously, but be prepared to use it if necessary to make our point. That's not a threat, that's not bluster. That's someone quietly reminding you who actually holds the cards. But Goodale isn't just talking theory here. He's lived this exact fight before. 30 years ago in a different room with different stakes, and the way that one ended might tell you exactly how this one will. 30 years ago, Canada won this exact fight. Nobody remembers it. Goodale was there, not as a commentator, but as the Minister of Agriculture, sitting across from American negotiators who wanted one thing, a cap on how much durum wheat Canada could sell into the U.S., and back home, that cap was deeply unpopular. Canadian grain producers hated it. So what did Canada do? They agreed to it. But here's the part that makes this a masterclass, not a concession. The cap they negotiated was set so high, Canada could never realistically hit it. The Americans got to walk away claiming victory, chests out, bragging rights secured, headlines written. Meanwhile, Canada quietly exported the largest volume of durum wheat in its history, ever, to that point. They had bragging rights, Goodale says. We had the cash. Read that twice, because it might be the exact playbook Canada is running right now.
The Americans went home with their bragging rights, beating their chests and saying how much they'd won. Meantime, we exported the largest volume of durum into the American market ever in history to that point. They had bragging rights. We have the cash.
Let them have the bragging rights. Canada's going for something else entirely. That's Goodale's bottom line, and it's not complicated. Stop getting distracted by the noise, the insults, the nasty comments, the theatrics. None of that is the main event. The main event is simple. Get the best possible result for Canadians, full stop. Because here's what this whole story boils down to. Trump wants a trophy. He wants the headline that says he beat Canada. Canada, meanwhile, isn't playing for headlines at all. It's playing for the cash, for the leverage, for the deal that actually holds up once the cameras are gone. He calls them nasty. They call his bluff. So now it's your turn. 6 days are ticking down. Should Canada hold the line and let these tariffs hit or take the deal and move on? Tell me below. I'm reading every single comment. And hey, if this kind of breakdown is what you come here for, make sure you're subscribed, drop a like, and let me know your take in the comments. It genuinely helps this channel keep digging into stories like this one.